February 1986. The Space Shuttle Challenger had just broken apart on live television. The nation was mourning. And Hollywood? Hollywood was quietly burying 8 films it hoped you would never remember. These were not cheap knockoffs or amateur productions. One starred 2 Academy Award winners reading words written by a future Nobel Prize winner. Another featured a rising star who later called it Career Quicksand. A French comedy sequel collapsed so completely that one of its leads refused to even speak French on camera. And one film was so heavily censored for American audiences that it earned $6 million at home and $100 million everywhere else. Some were hidden from critics. Others vanished after 4 days. A few became cult legends despite the industry's best efforts to forget them. This is the story of Hollywood's Graveyard Month and the 8 casualties it tried to bury forever. You won't believe number 1. Dream Lover was not supposed to be forgettable. It was supposed to be unforgettable. Directed by Alan J. Pakula, the man behind Klute, The Parallax View, and All the President's Men, this 1986 psychological thriller arrived with credentials that should have guaranteed attention. Instead, it became one of the most baffling misfires in Hollywood history. The film starred Christy McNichol as a woman plagued by disturbing sleep episodes after a traumatic incident. Cinematographer Sven Nykvist, Ingmar Bergman's legendary collaborator, shot it with what critics called frighteningly surreal and beautifully dreamy visuals. Composer Michael Small, who had scored Pakula's earlier masterpieces, provided the soundtrack. The creative team was formidable. The result was catastrophic. MGM released Dream Lover into just 171 theaters with almost no marketing. Opening weekend brought in $202,733. Total domestic gross landed at $502,237. Leonard Maltin called it abysmal, noting that an intriguing concept was torpedoed by snail-like pacing. The Los Angeles Times dubbed it the worst kind of sleeper, a sloggy zonker with all the energy of a tired dog. CinemaScore audiences gave it a D+. Today, Dream Lover exists as a footnote in Pakula filmographies, occasionally confused with the completely unrelated 1993 James Spader thriller of the same name. It won the Grand Prix at the Avoriaz Fantasy Film Festival, but even the audience there reportedly showed displeasure at the announcement. Some films fail spectacularly, others just fade away. Dream Lover did both. But if you think a psychological thriller from an acclaimed director could quietly disappear, wait until you see what happened to a Harold Pinter screenplay. Turtle Diary sounds like it should not exist. A screenplay by Harold Pinter, the playwright who would win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2005. 2 Academy Award winners, Glenda Jackson and Ben Kingsley, in the leading roles. Michael Gambon, Nigel Hawthorne, and a young Peter Capaldi in support. The premise: 2 lonely strangers independently become obsessed with liberating sea turtles from the London Zoo. Yes, really. United British Artists produced the film, a company founded by Jackson herself, alongside Albert Finney, Peter O'Toole, Diana Rigg, John Hurt, and Maggie Smith. The pedigree was extraordinary. The commercial appeal was non-existent. Turtle Diary opened to $40,115 and finished its domestic run at $2,156,772. Wikipedia notes it was one of the most successful films from United British Artists. That says everything about expectations. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars, calling it quiet, sly, and immensely amusing. The film holds 82% on Rotten Tomatoes, making it by far the best reviewed entry on this entire list. Critics praised Pinter's sparse screenplay and the way Jackson and Kingsley communicated through glances rather than exposition. Deliberately, the 2 protagonists never develop a romantic relationship, subverting every audience expectation. Here is what you won't believe. Turtle Diary has never been released on DVD, never been released on Blu-ray. A Harold Pinter screenplay with 2 legendary Oscar winners has effectively vanished from the physical media era. Streaming availability appears extremely limited. This is what happens when a quiet film about stealing turtles opens in February against blockbusters and prestige holdovers. But while Turtle Diary simply disappeared, the next entry on our list perished so completely that even its franchise's devoted fans forgot it existed. The original La Cage aux Folles from 1978 was one of the highest-grossing foreign-language films ever released in America. It earned a Golden Globe and 3 Oscar nominations. It spawned a beloved Broadway musical. Mike Nichols would remake it as The Birdcage with Robin Williams and Nathan Lane. The franchise was a phenomenon. Then came La Cage aux Folles 3, The Wedding, released Valentine's Day, 1986. Total domestic gross, $345,280. That is not a typo. Michel Serrault and Ugo Tognazzi returned for this third installment, but original director Edouard Molinaro did not. His replacement, Georges Lautner, brought a different comic sensibility that failed to land. The plot required the beloved characters to marry and produce an heir to inherit a fortune. Critics found the humor all but absent. One reviewer called it a sad, dull send-off for the series. A notable detail reveals the production's dysfunction. Tognazzi, an Italian actor, refused to speak French in all 3 films. His dialogue was dubbed throughout the entire franchise. By the third installment, the lip-sync issues had become noticeably distracting. The film received only 49 American theaters. It never stood a chance. Tognazzi passed away in 1990. Serrault in 2007. They never worked together again. As of recent records, no proper American DVD release has ever existed. La Cage aux Folles 3 proved that even beloved franchises could be destroyed by the wrong timing and the wrong creative choices. And yet, at least that film had theatrical distribution. The next entry barely lasted 4 days before Hollywood pretended it never happened. Terror Vision opened on Valentine's Day, 1986, in 256 theaters. It closed on February 17th. 4 days, total gross, $320,256. By Hollywood standards, it should have been forgotten instantly. Instead, it became a cult phenomenon. Director Ted Nicolau conceived Terror Vision as deliberate satire. Every character is an intentional stereotype pushed to absurdist extremes. Swinging parents, a survivalist grandfather, a punk rocker Valley Girl daughter played by Diane Franklin, her metalhead boyfriend played by John Grease. The production design was hyper-colorful and exaggerated, inspired by real residences Nicolau scouted in Los Angeles. The plot centers on an alien monster that arrives through the family's satellite dish. The entire film mocks 1980s consumer culture, suburban hedonism, and media addiction. Critics did not get the joke at all. Janet Maslin called it so smugly stupid that it was hard to tell whether the creatures were any less attractive than the human family. Rotten Tomatoes shows 10%. But here's the twist that makes Terror Vision fascinating. Diane Franklin later explained what went wrong. The 80s had not caught up everywhere yet, so people did not get it. They were parodying an era that had not finished defining itself. Decades later, Franklin discovered the cult following at a horror convention. She thought fans would want to discuss her role in Amityville 2. Instead, everybody came for Terror Vision. It was shocking, she said. Scream Factory released a definitive Blu-ray restoration in 2013. The film is featured in the In Search of Darkness documentary series. Nicolau has hinted at a possible sequel. 4 days in theaters. 4 decades of growing devotion. Sometimes the films that die fastest live the longest. But while Terror Vision found resurrection through devoted fans, the next entry launched an entirely different kind of career. Lady Jane was supposed to be Helena Bonham Carter's triumphant arrival. She was 19 years old with no formal acting training when Paramount Pictures released this lavish 142-minute historical drama about the 9 days Queen of England. Director Trevor Nunn came from the Royal Shakespeare Company. Cinematographer Douglas Slocum had shot the Indiana Jones trilogy. Editor Anne V. Coates had cut Lawrence of Arabia. The pedigree was impeccable. Opening weekend brought $55,964. Total domestic gross, $277,646. The film recovered approximately 3% of its estimated $8.5 million budget. It essentially vanished. Critics were mixed. Janet Maslin wrote that the film ought to summon more emotion than it does. TV Guide called it a gorgeously photographed travesty of history. Variety praised Bonham Carter's performance as top drawer while noting the film's strangely dated feeling. Rotten Tomatoes currently shows 56% from limited reviews. Here is where Lady Jane becomes important. Rob Reiner saw Cary Elwes playing the romantic lead and cast him as Wesley in The Princess Bride the following year. In his memoir, As You Wish, Elwes recounts Reiner telling him that he had seen Cary and Lady Jane, but that picture was not a comedy. Despite total commercial failure, Lady Jane directly produced one of the most beloved performances in film history. Bonham Carter later grew frustrated with The English Rose, typecasting that followed her early period dramas. She told interviewers that The English Rose had definitely wilted and that she wanted more interesting parts. Fight Club and Harry Potter would eventually provide them. Sometimes a film fails on its own terms while succeeding beyond anyone's imagination. But the next entry failed so spectacularly that its star reportedly called it career devastation. After Footloose made Kevin Bacon a star in 1984, Columbia Pictures invested an estimated $10 million in Quicksilver, a drama about a stockbroker who loses everything and becomes a bicycle messenger in San Francisco. Bacon trained for 4 months on a fixed gear track bike. The director, Thomas Michael Donnelly, had actually worked as a bike messenger himself. The production seemed positioned for youthful appeal. Opening weekend delivered $3.17 million. Final domestic gross, $7,634,909. A clear loss before marketing costs were calculated. Rotten Tomatoes shows 13% from 16 reviews. Roger Ebert identified the fundamental problem precisely. He called it a collision between realism and gloss, between a story that demands street-level authenticity and a style inspired by music videos. The New York Times noted that when characters were doing stunts or racing through traffic to a strong rock beat, there was something to watch. For the rest of the time, Quicksilver was as much fun as a slow leak. The film was tonally confused at every level. It was set in San Francisco, but filmed in Los Angeles. Characters had New York accents. It tried to be a drama, romance, thriller, sports movie, and MTV showcase simultaneously. The cast included a young Lawrence Fishburne, comedian Louis Anderson, and Jamie Gertz, who is now a billionaire and co-owner of the Atlanta Hawks. Perhaps the most telling detail, the only verified quote from Kevin Bacon about this period comes from discussing Flatliners 4 years later. He called it the first movie he was in since Footloose that made any money. Quicksilver lives in that gap, the wilderness years. But while Bacon's career eventually recovered spectacularly, the next film on our list was attacked so savagely by critics that it seemed destined for permanent dismissal. They were wrong. The Hitcher opened on February 21, 1986, and immediately faced some of the most hostile reviews of the decade. Roger Ebert called it diseased and corrupt. Gene Siskel labeled it nauseating. Both critics gave it 0 stars. On The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, when asked if he opposed censorship, Ebert delivered a memorable line: "The film should be made, it should be shown, and it should not be attended by anybody." Rutger Hauer played a nameless, motiveless antagonist terrorizing C. Thomas Howell across the desert Southwest. Eric Red wrote the screenplay at age 24, inspired by the Doors song Riders on the Storm. He mailed pitch letters to 300 Hollywood producers, promising the script would prevent sleep for a week. Budget estimates range from $5.8 to $7.9 million. Final domestic gross, $5,844,868. But here is where The Hitcher defies expectations. That 62% Rotten Tomatoes score, it reflects a dramatic critical reappraisal over decades. The original Metacritic weighted average sits at 32. Showing exactly how far opinion has shifted. Christopher Nolan has publicly called it one of his favorite guilty pleasures. Howell's stories about working with Hauer are remarkable. About 3 weeks into shooting, Hauer invited him to lunch and sat in silence chain smoking. When Howell finally asked about playing antagonist roles, Hauer leaned in, exhaled smoke, and whispered, "I do not play bad guys." That phrase rattled around in Howell's head for years until he understood the importance of injecting humanity into villainous performances. Second Sight Films released a 4K restoration from the original camera negative in late 2024, supervised by director Robert Harmon, with a 200-page hardback book and archival commentary featuring Hauer, who passed away in 2019. Full circle vindication for a film once called diseased. But if The Hitcher represents critical rehabilitation, the final entry on our list represents something even more extraordinary, a film that earned $6 million at home and $100 million abroad, because Americans never saw the real version. At first glance, 9.5 weeks should have been a sensation. Director Adrian Lyne had just made Flashdance. Mickey Rourke was the hottest actor in Hollywood. Kim Basinger was ascending towards superstardom. An erotic drama with genuine stars and a proven commercial director seemed like guaranteed success. Opening weekend, $328,804. Final domestic gross, $6,735,922 against an estimated $17 million budget. CinemaScore, D, catastrophe. But the real story of 9.5 weeks lies in what American audiences never saw. The original cut received an X rating from the MPAA. To secure an R rating, MGM removed approximately 12 minutes of material. The most significant excision was a scene that caused 2/3 of a test audience to walk out. Another removed scene showed the couple in an alley under pouring rain. What remained was what one critic called an MTV video instead of the film they actually made. Line described test screenings as bedlam. Audiences screamed so loudly in the final reels that you could not hear yourself think. He called them almost like a lynch mob. He fled. The impossible position was maddening. Critics said he did not go far enough. Audiences said he went too far. The American version satisfied nobody. International audiences saw the full, uncut version. The film reportedly grossed approximately $100 million worldwide. It played for 5 years at a single Paris cinema, 30 months at São Paulo's Cine Belas Artes. Europe and South America embraced what America rejected. Kim Basinger has been its most passionate defender for decades. She called the American release a betrayal, scenes they chickened out on. Not explicit things, but things that were emotionally and psychologically tough. In a 2025 Variety interview, she named 9.5 Weeks her favorite movie of anything she has done. She ran the gamut of emotions, she said. It was like an exorcism. She has zero regrets. The home video release vindicated everything. The uncut version became a massive rental phenomenon. The food scene, featuring a blindfolded Kim Basinger, became one of cinema's most iconic and parodied sequences. Joe Cocker's You Can Leave Your Hat On became forever linked to the film. The direct-to-video wave of adult-oriented thrillers through the 1990s, over 700 films, borrowed from Line's visual playbook. Director Helena Rain cited it as a direct influence on Baby Girl, starring Nicole Kidman. Line's career suffered no permanent damage. His next film was Fatal Attraction in 1987. $320 million worldwide. 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director. 9.5 Weeks failed not because audiences rejected it. It failed because the studio rejected it first, then gave audiences a censored version that pleased no one. The real film found its audience anyway. It just took longer. February 1986 was supposed to be a graveyard. Studios sent 8 films there, expecting them to disappear quietly. Some used star power, some used prestigious screenwriters, others used shock value or satirical ambition. What they all had in common was timing that guaranteed failure, but graveyards have a way of giving up their secrets. The Hitcher got its 4K restoration and Criterion-level treatment. TerrorVision became a convention favorite. 9.5 Weeks earned its international reputation through patience. Even Lady Jane contributed something eternal by leading directly to The Princess Bride. These films were not failures. They were misplaced, dumped in the wrong month, released to the wrong version of America. Were they casualties of Hollywood indifference or survivors of corporate cowardice? How many of these February 1986 casualties have you actually seen? Which one shocked you most? The Harold Pinter screenplay that has never been released on DVD, or the erotic drama that earned $100 million overseas but failed at home? If you made it this far, you have earned that like button. Subscribe for more hidden Hollywood history and forgotten film disasters. Because sometimes the best movies are the ones Hollywood tried hardest to bury. See you in the next one.